I watched Ironheart, and what is happening with this show? I have some questions. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're here to talk about Ironheart. It just had its 3-episode premiere. I watched all 3 episodes. I did also some reactions to those, which you can find for members, and you can also find over on Patreon. So if you want to see me reacting to it in real time, I had some reactions, I'll tell you that. Ironheart is a show that I've been looking forward to because I like the character of Riri Williams. I feel like she is an interesting character in the comics. I liked what they did with her in Wakanda Forever. I like Dominique Thorne's performance. So I was actually like, you know what? I'm kind of looking forward to this, even though there was a severe lack of promotion for this series. However, I felt with Agatha All Along, we also didn't get as much promotion, although I still think Agatha All Along got more promotion than Ironheart did in the lead up to its release. And I thought, you know, just because we don't get a ton of promotion doesn't mean that it's gonna be bad, doesn't mean that it's gonna be mid, because Agatha All Along I thought was really fun. And actually, once it picked up steam, it boomed to the point that Disney had it on its homepage and was like catering everything and even reworked the YouTube channel to promote Agatha All Along. I don't know if that was part of their plan, but I personally think they pivoted once it became more successful. So I was thinking Ironheart could be doing the same thing, right? Like maybe it'll be a sleeper hit and then everyone will watch it and we'll all be talking about it. And we're all talking about it, but not for the reasons I was hoping for. And I want to say, starting off with episode 1 and 2, I was disappointed in this series. I feel like the script is not good. I feel like the editing also is not great. And it just feels very generic in terms of the overall look of this show. There doesn't seem to be a strong creative vision that's really propelling this show forward, despite the fact that I actually feel the actors are doing a good job. But the problem is a lot of these characters are two-dimensional. We do have a few people, kind of the main players, I would say, that have a little bit more going for them in terms of depth for the characters. I would say Riri is one of those characters, and like maybe I could see Joe being one of those characters, who we later find out, this is a major spoiler for episode 3, so skip ahead like 15 seconds if you don't want to hear this part, is the son of Stane, of course, our first Iron Man villain, Iron Monger, who I still cannot believe we had Jeff Bridges playing in that movie. That's crazy to me. But so Joe is actually Stane's son, Ezekiel, Zeke, if you will. So that was a crazy revelation. And I think there's potential for depth with that character. But overall, I feel like a lot of the characters are kind of a wash. And the one thing I will say in terms of the acting too, though, is that every actor is still trying with what they have, and some of them have really great on-screen chemistry together. I, in particular, think that Dominique Thorne actually has great on-screen chemistry with almost everyone she's on screen with. She just has a sort of spark to her performance, even though I don't always agree with Riri's choices, but that's not necessarily Dominique's problem. Once again, that's a script problem. And it's really disappointing because even though the script at times, in terms of choices that Riri makes, characterization and dialogue kind of fails us, there are elements to it that I think are cool. This idea of it almost being kind of a heist show where each episode is like a different heist we're going on. I like that as a concept. The problem with the heists is that they feel very unoriginal in terms of the people that we're taking from. In episode 2, our heist is, well, in episode 1, our heist is basically Riri's audition, which I strangely think is the most original one of them all, even though it was completely spoiled for us in the trailer, which is sad. In episode 2, we're taken from Tunnel Lady, who is a lady that is making tunnels so people can transit faster. First of all, that sounds just kind of dumb, I'm gonna be honest with you. But second of all, what even is this whole company? I have so many questions about that. The heist itself is all right, and there were a few sequences that I found to be kind of exciting. The part where Riri is about to be crushed and like basically using Natalie as her AI, she has to kind of, as her guide, has to come up with a different way to deal with the problem after she loses what I would call her goober, the device that has a virus on it that they're using to infect the company so they can like take it over, I think is what's happening. Some of the heist points too just aren't as clear as they could be. Things feel a bit muddy in this show, which is another problem that I have with it. But at least the heist part of it was more exciting and more compelling. Now, the next heist in episode 3, I think also is pretty compelling because the stakes get really high, not just for Riri in this one, but in episode 3, like, everyone's in danger. Even though, once again, the heist sounds kind of goofy. What are we doing? There's a plant bro. He grows plants in a greenhouse in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the lake. He's in the middle of water, and he's growing plants, and we're gonna come in there, and we're gonna make him give us his company too, with a contract. I wonder who likes contracts. I wonder what those posters of Faust mean. I wonder what the song choices mean in this. There's a lot of points to things that feel like the most obvious points in the world. And what I think they're pointing at is Mephisto. I don't even think I need to say it. I guess that's also a pretty big spoiler, except that I believe Mephisto's appearance was announced at a Disney convention. But yeah, the whole point of episode 3 heist is getting this contract signed by Plant Bro, but you can't bring metal into this facility. Oh no, because it triggers some stuff. But Riri, she's starting to feel that the hood is shady, which, yeah, of course he's shady. You knew the whole time he was shady. So now she's trying to get a sample of his cloak so that she can analyze the energy that it comes from, because Riri's a woman of science, so she doesn't know about this magic stuff, and she's like, I don't even believe in this magic stuff. Let me get a piece of this cloak. So she brings in a little laser cutter and hides it under basically fake flesh that is a whole thing, which doesn't even look good, by the way, unfortunately. But anyways, that's fine. She gets in there and she's gonna do that. Unfortunately, sets off the sensors while she's using her laser cutter. She pushes it a little too far, and then what happens is everything starts shutting down and everything gets flooded with CO2, which actually is really scary. And it leads to one of my favorite fight sequences in the show, which is actually Riri versus Johnny. So she gets into this fight with Parker's cousin, and it was a pretty interesting fight. Also because the fight comes from a place where it's really sort of breaking down who these characters are throughout the fight. And it was a good example of why I love fights as storytelling. I talk about action a lot on my channel. If you don't know that, if you're new here, welcome. I like talking about action. I love action in films, and I feel like it is such a good storytelling tool, and there is so much story that you can have just in one fight if you know what you're doing in terms of the choreography, which this fight did. Now, the disappointing part about the show is that anytime I feel we get some good fight choreo, and I would say there's actually a decent amount of pretty good fight choreo actually in the show, it's just not shot well and not captured well. And this is a perfect example of something I was talking about, like with Daredevil Born Again, where I felt a lot of people's issues with the fight choreo was actually coming from the way it was more captured than the fight choreo itself, which I didn't really have a lot of problems with. I actually thought the fight choreo in that show was quite good. But I think people sometimes misinterpret where the issue lies when it comes to fights. And this show is a perfect example of where the issue can come from, not necessarily the choreography, but the way that the fight is captured and showcased in the story. And it's just not well done for most of the show, even though the fight choreographer is clearly trying. This also comes down to being, I think, mainly a direction issue. And I guess a silver lining with this show is that the director for the first 3 episodes is not the same as the next 3 episodes. The director for these first 3 episodes was Sam Bailey, and while maybe some other stuff that they've done has been great, I do feel that this show, not very good in terms of direction and not great in terms of writing either. It seems like a lot of the people, when I was looking up the names of the folks that are on the show and looking up some of their resumes, I do think what's kind of cool about the show is it seems to be some younger artists that they decided to get involved in Ironheart, which I think is cool. However, it might have been beneficial to maybe have someone more senior, or it could just be that they were kind of encouraged as younger people that are a bit more malleable perhaps to really make this show very cookie cutter, as opposed to let it be unique and original and pushing their creators to do wild things. Because the show just feels very safe a lot of the times. Speaking of that, the characters, like I said, being two-dimensional is also interesting because some of them are literal characters from the comics. Like we have a version of the Blood Brothers in this who are made to feel very basic and kind of uninteresting, very two-dimensional. They also appear in the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which I honestly was like, oh yeah, I forgot that those were even the same characters because of how different they are. And what this boils down to is I just feel like this feels like a show where they grabbed some names for characters and grabbed like what they do, but didn't really bother to understand what makes those characters cool and integrate that into the show and into the writing. Same with Slug, honestly. I mean, when it comes to Slug, it's like they kind of remind me of some characters, but I'm like, I don't know if that would make any sense. Like, the only Slug I can think of is Ulysses Lugman. But like, this can't be that Slug, right? Because like, this is what that Slug looks like, right? So then there's also Rampage. Rampage looks like this in the comics, and this is Stu in the show, who's played by Eric Andre, who I love, by the way. And then we have, I mean, John, I guess, is probably supposed to be Parker Robbins' cousin. And Parker's obviously Parker. He's the Hood, so that all kind of makes sense. Clown would then be Elliot Franklin, which feels random. Yeah, I'm just not sure. I mean, I guess the Blood Brothers are... Wait a second. This has Slug listed as Ulysses X Lugman. I don't think we're given Slug's full name in the show. We're just told that they're a cyber hacker from Madripoor. But wait a minute, did they just take these names and just assign them kind of to random people? So these are supposed to be the characters from the comics, except that a lot of them are not really like the comics. And we're not even just talking here about like that they look different or genders were changed. I honestly don't mind that. But the essence of who these characters are just isn't there at all. And I know that what you might say is that these are very niche characters. And yes, some of them are very niche characters. But then why even have them in there if you don't feel like you have an understanding of who the character is and you're just going to choose a name out of a hat? Just make a new character. Why not? Make a new character. I'd rather you did that, to be honest with you. I mean, the interesting thing with Slug is that Slug actually made me think of a different character. Darkveil, who's a mutant in the comics, who is also actually even more of a niche character than Slug is in the comics. Darkveil is a mutant who can use Dark Force to teleport, and I thought that would be kind of cool. And Darkveil also has green hair and is also a drag queen, which I believe... Slug is established as being a former drag queen, so I thought maybe there could be some connection there, but no, I guess Slug is just Slug? Okay. But also, but why though? But why? And overall, I feel like that just kind of sums up my feels about this show. It just feels odd. It feels like they felt compelled to do the show, but they didn't really know what they were doing with it. And that is my main problem with it so far. Granted, like I said, the heist element of it I think is kind of cool. I think the idea of Riri suffering with these panic attacks because of trauma, but the implication that she maybe always had panic attacks and her best friend Natalie is the one that talked her down. The family dynamics with her losing her stepdad, her connection with her mom, her loss of her best friend, even though I think Natalie is also a character that feels a bit generic, honestly. All of that stuff is interesting. They even go in a little bit to her relationship to Iron Man, which I didn't even know if we were going to talk about Iron Man in this, and at least they did. But that also feels like they're just putting it in there because it has to be in there because it's in the comics a little bit. It just doesn't feel like her building this suit is really as important as it could be. I understand she's building the suit to protect people because of what happened to her and because of what happened to her best friend and losing her dad. And so that's the idea of the suit, I think. It's her way of processing her grief to build something to prevent a drive-by ever happening again, is her idea. However, why does it have to be a suit? There's just stuff that's missing. And even the idea of why the suit is being made, which I like in terms of how it connects to Riri, I feel like is a bit lackluster because we just never really have these quiet moments where we get to explore the importance of this suit. Even when Riri is working on the suit, it's more of like a kind of more of a fun montage than it is a, you know, serious, I'm really focusing on this because it's really important to me montage. And the only time that it gets serious is when it's broken up by like a vision of like thinking back about what she's lost and the trauma that that inflicts on her. So overall, I would say for the first 3 episodes, I'm gonna say episode 1 for me was a 2 out of 5. I'll say episode 2 was a little bit more interesting. So I don't know though. I feel like that one's still kind of a 2 out of 5. Those bullets were looking kind of rough. And episode 3, I guess I'd give it like a 3 out of 5. I think there's still some really good elements, but I still have major problems with the show. I think the stakes are good. It's just unfortunate because I feel like the acting is actually good in this. So I feel like they wasted some of the talent that they have in the show. The production is really where my main issues are, not the cast. So yeah, it's kind of where I stand on it. I'll be back to talk about the last 3 episodes. Let me know what you're thinking of Ironheart. You know, are you liking it? Are you not liking it? Why not? Let's discuss in the comments. But please, let's keep it civil, you know? Let's all respect that we can have different opinions and still coexist. And yeah, just discuss. And are you an Ironheart fan from the comics? And what do you love about Ironheart? I'd love to hear more about that. Give me your recommended readings if you are, because I do want to read more about Riri, because I think she's a cool character. That's all I have for this one. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, friends, as always, stay nerdy.